Hello everyone, my name is Toluwanimi Ololade and I'm a student at UTD, and this summer I completed research through NSF's REU program on audio watermark robustness in AI generated speech in the context of forensic reliability and legal consideration. I quickly want to go over the presentation structure. So first we have the background and abstract where I explain what vision and deepfake audio is and the status quo of deepfake audio. Then I go into related work compassing detection frameworks and then my research questions. And then I also go into my research methodology, which spans a case study and experimental study, and then I discuss the recommendations and legal proposals I have, and lastly, future work. In recent years, AI generated media, particularly synthetic audio and video, has grown rapidly in realism and accessibility. This has created major challenges for verifying authenticity and maintaining digital trust. The videos here show deepfake examples where AI has convincingly replicated public figures. I will only play the first one due to time.
It is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality?
This clip of Morgan Freeman fooled me until I checked the comments that it was indeed AI generated. And just like I was fooled, I believe many of us have also been fooled by some other deepfake output at some time. And also here I have news articles of lawsuits and legal landscape surrounding deepfake audio. What's alarming is how easily this technology can be used to spread misinformation or impersonate trusted voices. As audio synthesis continues to improve, it's not just about the visuals anymore. Voices can be cloned and used in scams, fraud, or misinformation campaigns. This growing capability highlights the urgent need for detection tools and traceability solutions. What's the status quo? Most detection tools today are reactive. They respond after something suspicious happens. For example, after a scam, after a deepfake spreads, or after a platform receives a complaint. What we actually need are proactive solutions that can flag manipulation in real time. Also, many providers like OpenAI, Meta, Google, they include terms in their user agreement that shift responsibility entirely to the user. Their terms of use typically prohibit misuse, for example, impersonation fraud, and it also disclaims liability for how the outputs are used, the AI outputs are used, and also it offers no guarantee of traceability or forensic support. In other words, if synthetic audio is used in a harmful way, these companies are not obligated to help investigators trace it, even though they created the tools. This brings me to the abstract of my research. As synthetic voices get more realistic, they're becoming harder to distinguish from human speech. This creates real risks. People can be tricked, manipulated, or impersonated using AI generated audio. To address this, I focused on audio watermarking, a method that embeds hidden signals into audio files to help trace and authenticate them later. The goal was to test how strong and reliable these watermarks really are when the audio is edited or attacked. I put a watermarking system through a series of attacks. Then I evaluated them based on how accurately they could still be detected, how transparent they were, and whether they remained practical in real world use. Ultimately, this research supports the development of stronger AI assisted watermarking validation systems to reinforce trust in audio communication, especially as voice synthesis becomes more widespread and definitely harder to regulate. Additionally, these are the key research questions that guided my study. The first question talks about how we can improve watermarking for AI generated speech so it holds up against attacks like noise, compression, or cropping without hurting audio quality. This question shaped the core of my experimental setup. The second question is about governance. Right now, watermarking isn't enforced. Companies can choose whether or not to use it. So I asked, should there be a certified watermark authority, like a certificate trust authority, that defines what must be embedded and audits compliance? And the last question takes it a step further into real world application. If digital assistants like Siri or Alexa are vulnerable to cloned voices, can we equip them with watermark detectors that can flag or reject tampered input? Now, onto the related work, which dives into the different watermarking frameworks that currently exist for audio authentication. Understanding these existing frameworks is important because it shows what's already been tried, where the limitations are, and how my research builds on or challenges those approaches. The first framework is the spread spectrum framework. This method spreads the watermark across the audio's frequency range, making it harder to detect or remove without distorting the whole signal. And then there's the patchwork framework, which is a variation where sample groups are slightly modified in opposite directions. It's useful for resisting simple edits, but it can be vulnerable to targeted attacks. Then there's the spatial domain watermarking, which directly modifies audio sample bits. It's simple, it supports high payloads, and works well in legacy systems, but it's also very fragile, so compression or re-encoding can easily destroy the watermark. Then there's the transform domain watermarking, which is currently used in modern systems. It embeds the watermark in the audio's frequency component. It's much more robust and preserves audio quality better. However, it often requires that the original audio or precise transform parameters to detect the watermark, which makes blind detection harder. Moreover, there's the hybrid watermarking system, which combines multiple transforms to improve robustness. So it involves combining two different watermarking systems. It's widely used in commercial systems, but the trade-off is the increased computational complexity. And then there's DNN-based watermarking, which uses deep learning models like autoencoders and neural networks to decide where and how to embed the watermark. The limitation is the training costs and a lack of standard benchmarks. And then there's crypto watermarking, just like its name, which embeds hashes or secret keys, so only authorized systems can verify the content. The challenge is that it's vulnerable to brute force attacks, and so it needs additional safeguards. And now that we've looked at the technical frameworks, let's shift to the companies, like what companies are actually using them. Uh, There's Meta's Audio Seal, which uses a neural watermarking tool that embeds signals throughout an entire audio track using two neural networks. It's free on GitHub, but Meta hasn't applied it in their own voice models yet. And then there's Google Synth ID, which embeds a watermark through a mathematical algorithm that only Synth ID itself can detect. It's still in its early rollout, but it shows promise for controlled ecosystems. And then there's Adobe Content Credentials, which adds cryptographically signed metadata to show who created a piece of content. But as of right now, it's only applicable for text and images. And then there's C2PA, it's like an open industry standard for digital media transparency. It's not a watermarking tool, but it like supports watermarking by attaching verifiable content history to files. Audio support for it right now is also still limited. And then there's Resembles AI's Perth watermarking system, also built using deep learning models. It embeds data into common speech frequencies, and although it's not officially yet released, so it's hard to evaluate its real world impact. Before diving into watermarking, I wanted to test how vulnerable digital assistants are to voice cloning. So I ran a personal case study using 11 labs to clone voices, starting with mine and voice samples from 8 other volunteers. I cloned them and used the AI generated voices to issue commands and questions to Siri. The idea was to simulate real world usage and see if Siri could tell the difference between a real voice and a fake one. The result, most digital assistants responded to the cloned voices as if they were real, so no alert, no hesitation. This shows that without built in safeguards, voice assistants are still vulnerable to impersonation and vision style attacks. These are the results from the voice cloning test I described earlier. The table shows how each cloned voice performed in two ways, whether Siri or a digital assistant accepted the voice as real, and whether the people believed the celebrity clones were authentic when shared publicly. Out of seven actual volunteers, five were able to trigger their assistants using cloned voices, giving a success rate of about 71%. This highlights how convincingly AI can replicate human speech. Interestingly, I also observed a pattern. Clones of African and South Asian accents were more likely to fail, which suggests potential bias in voice assistant recognition, another area worth deeper study. And these results reinforce why watermarking and real-time detection need to be built into systems like Siri and Alexa. They currently can't tell the difference between real and synthetic input. And then I set up an experiment to test audio seal's robustness. I started with a 32-second voice recording using a basic computer mic, my computer mic, in a natural environment, just like a regular user might record. Then I used audio seal to embed a predefined 16-bit binary watermark into the audio. The goal was to do it in a way that didn't distort the sound, so it stayed perceptually transparent. To test how strong that watermark really was, I applied different attacks, which I'll discuss in the next slide, one at a time. And after each attack, I ran audio seals detector to see if the watermark was still there. This helped me measure how well the watermark could survive under common tampering conditions. The slide shows the five main types of attacks I added to the watermarked audio to test how resilient audio still really is. The first is the resampling attack, where it changes the sample rate of the audio, say from 16 kilohertz to 8 kilohertz. The goal is to distort the watermark's timing and spacing because even though the sound may seem fine to the ear, it would distort the watermark's timing and spacing. And then there's noise addition. Here I used AWGN or additive wide gauge noise, which mimics real-world interference. It's commonly used to degrade signal quality, and the challenge is that the watermark has to survive without being drowned out. And the next is filtering attack, where I applied a low-pass filter. These strip out certain frequency components. So if the watermark lives in those bands, it could be wiped out completely. And then there's a cropping attack, which simulates editing or network loss. In this, I removed random chunks of the audio, so my 32-second audio recording became 15 seconds. The goal is to break the continuity of the watermark, especially for those spread across time. And then there's a cryptographic attack, where it simulates an attacker trying to forge the watermark using key-based methods. In this test, I replaced audio's watermark message with the original audio's watermark message with a forged 16-bit sequence. On the right side of the slide, I included snippets of the actual Python code used to run these attacks. Each script like cropping.py, compression.py, or crypto.py, it calls the detector after applying its specific attack. You can also see the use of audio source detector being called at the bottom of all underscore attacks.py, where it prints the confidence score and extracted message after each run. This setup allowed me to simulate realistic tampering and measured how detection performance dropped or held up under each condition. This slide explains how well the watermark held up under each of the attacks I applied. The control row represents the original unaltered audio that I already added a watermark to. As expected, audio still returned a perfect confidence score of 1.0 and the exact 16-bit message with no distortion. And then resampling and compression also had no impact on watermark integrity. The confidence stayed at 1 and the extracted message matched the original, showing that AudioSoul's watermark is actually resilient to these common operations. With cropping, the confidence dropped significantly to 0.57 and you can see bit errors in the message. This shows that removing sections of the audio breaks the continuity of the watermark, but I plan on testing more with longer audio times. And noise addition even caused more distortion. The confidence dropped further to 0.41, but interestingly, the extracted message remained unchanged. This shows that a watermark signal can still survive background noise. but the model is less confident in what it detects. Filtering had a high confidence score of 0.97, but it introduced bit level distortions in the message. This means that the watermark is partially disrupted when certain frequency ranges are removed. In the cryptographic attack, the system still detected a watermark and returned like full confidence, but the message was completely different than the original. This did not break the watermark itself, but it shows how easily the payload can be overridden without being flagged. That's a major integrity issue. Overall, these results highlight the strengths and the blind spots of AudioSeal's current watermarking system. It's robust under some transformations, but vulnerable to targeted tampering attacks like cryptographic overwriting and corrupting attack. So, based on the experimental results, here are my key recommendations for strengthening AudioSeal, specifically in response to research question 1, which asked how we can make watermarking more resilient to tampering while preserving audio quality. First, I recommend adopting a hybrid watermarking model. AudioSeal already embeds watermarks throughout the full audio track using neural networks. By combining that with cryptographic hashes, we can also verify whether a message was altered. This adds tamper detection, especially for cryptographic attacks. Secondly, I suggest adding tamper detection logging. This means that the system should track abnormal confidence drops or unusual beat patterns and log them for real-time monitoring. But since AudioSeal is currently not applying it to their own system, this is just a general recommendation for watermarking systems that will soon be rolling out. And then finally, AudioSeal could embed and link traceable metadata like model IDs, timestamps, or origin hashes directly into the watermark. Linking this to a blockchain would support forensic traceability and help in legal investigations by providing a verifiable history of the audio file. Now, these recommendations don't only apply to AudioSeal, they also apply to watermarking, like all other watermarking systems. Now, moving on from technical recommendations to policy, this slide looks at the broader legal and ethical questions surrounding watermarking. The central question is if your voice was used to scam someone, who's accountable? Global efforts are starting to emerge. The No Fakes Acts in the US and China's watermarking mandate are both signs that regulation is coming, but it's still early, and most laws are limited or proposed, not enforced. That said, mandatory watermarking isn't without concerns. If detection algorithms are made public, attackers could find ways to remove them. So the goal is balance. Watermarking should be transparent, decentralized, and auditable, while still protecting individual rights and avoiding power concentration. Now, this slide ties together research questions 2 and 3, focusing on the need for a coordinated watermark governance and detection framework. I proposed the creation of a centralized watermark authority bigger than C2PA that would enforce standardization across all AI generated content. Just like AudioSeal's watermark can only be detected by its own system, firms should also be allowed to build their own detection tools tailored to their platforms and threat models. That way, it's harder for attackers to exploit a single predictable system. But here's the key: all detection tools must be compatible with the shared standard. This way, we ensure that detection works regardless of who created the content or which system is reading it. To wrap this up, this slide highlights the next steps based on the findings from my research. My future work is to focus on enhancing real-time detection of watermarks, especially in noisier or compressed audio environments. And then I also plan to evaluate new tools like Google Synth ID for audio as soon as it becomes available. And then I also want to focus on integrating watermark detection into consumer technologies, especially assistants like Siri or Alexa. And if we want to like reduce voice-based threats, these systems need to be able to recognize and respond to AI input in real time. All of these directions, they aim to push watermarking from research into real-world application. Ultimately, the goal is just not to detect deepfakes, but to build systems that prevent their misuse in the first place. Thank you.